up, seventh grade? Welcome to section B of your gallery walk assignment. Now we are going to be doing that time traveling I was referring to earlier, looking at some documents from that time period and just really trying to get a grasp on the context of what was going on during Frederick Douglass's time when he wrote this autobiography, The Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass. So just as a reminder, you can have my video going on one side of your screen and the Google Doc on the other side. So you can pause and respond as we go through each of these items in the gallery walk. So what I'm going to do to make things a little bit more convenient for you, as you can see, I already have my gallery walk notes, section B, on this side of the screen here. I'm pretty straightforward with how this is laid out. You're going to ask yourself, how might this relate to the central text, which is the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass? And this question connects to this, your previous thought about what this book might be about. So when we see each item, think about how that's going to connect or what it has to do with the central text we're going to be looking at. And then finally, record any observations that you found interesting or any questions that you might have or may have about the item. This is going to come into play when we go to record our flip grid responses after this is all said and done. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to minimize this here for us. And let's go ahead and bring up our gallery walk. Let me just make this full screen for everybody. All right, cool. So, can I zoom in? Yes, I can. Here we go. All right. So we're officially getting started with the gallery walk. Keep in mind, I like to look at the dates to get an idea of when things were written, because that helps us kind of get an idea of what was taking place in those different time periods. Now, these all aren't going to be from that time period, those 1840s, 1860s range, but they most certainly apply. So let's start. Item A, slave ships. Loaded like spoons into the belly of Jesus, where we lay for weeks, for months, in the sweat and stink of our own breathing. And that was from Slave Ships by Lucille Clifton. All right, we're going to go to item B here, which is a map showing slave and free states before the Civil War around 1850. I'm doing something a little bit different. What I'm going to show you is a map of the United States that goes from the late 1700s all the way up until about this date, actually around like 1860, right before the start of the Civil War. So again, feel free to pause at any time if you want to take a closer look at any of these items. But here is the picture. Oh, shoot, hold on, let it run back here. Of course, the magic of technology doesn't always work the way we want it to, but what you see taking place up top, I want to bring your attention to two things. One, obviously, free states are going to be in the north, slave states are in the south, and we're starting here, 1789, and notice the United States, again, there's the Northwest Ordinance, and the territories, westward expansion that we've started to get into. You can see how rapidly and how quickly the United States is growing. 1837, 1846, all right. Notice not a whole lot is changing really between this north and south until we get to 1858, and that's important, and especially 1861, and that's important for the next thing I want to draw your attention to is this area right down here, all right? Slave states up top, free states on the bottom. Just look at the number as the dates go along. All right, slave states outnumbered free states until about 1821. They're even for that decade. Nothing changed in 1846. They stayed this. Ooh, in 1830. Okay, slave states outnumber free states. Now free states outnumber slave states. Ooh, yeah, it increased. All right, so that's gallery walk B. And again, just taking a look at how things sort of shifted during that time. All right, here are some pictures of slaves in a cotton field. Let's see if I can bring this in even closer for you. Let's give you some time there. You can always pause to take a look at it. I don't want to take up too much time in the video here. And this is from the photography credits go to Hubbard and Mix, entitled Cotton Field Retreat Plantation. That was in Port Royal Island, South Carolina in 1860. Again, taken 1 year before the first shots of the Civil War were fired, the war between the North and the South. All right, let me back this out here. Here we go. All right, now this is a quote directly from the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass. There were no beds given the slaves, unless one coarse blanket be considered such, and none by the men and women had these. This, however, is not considered a very great privation. They find less difficulty from the want of beds than from the want of time to sleep. When this work is done, old and young, male and female, married and single, drop down side by side on one common bed, the cold, damp floor, each covering himself or herself with their miserable blankets, and here they sleep until they are summoned to the field by the driver's horn. Mr. Severe, the overseer, used to stand by the door of the quarter, armed with a large hickory stick and heavy cowskin, ready to whip anyone who was so unfortunate as to not hear, or, from any other cause, was prevented from being ready to start for the field at the sound of the horn. All right, that's from the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass, Boston, Massachusetts, Anti-Slavery Office, 1845. All right, so 1845 is when Frederick Douglass had published his initial work. Here's another quote from the life of Frederick Douglass. I have been frequently asked how I felt when I found myself in a free state. I have never been able to answer the question with any satisfaction to myself. It was a moment of the highest excitement I ever experienced. I suppose I felt as one may imagine the unarmed mariner to feel when he is rescued by a friendly man of war from the pursuit of a pirate. I felt like one who had escaped a den of hungry lions. All right, so there's a lot of imagery going on here. For those of you who don't know, an unarmed mariner is an unarmed sailor, is someone who was on a ship. All right, and they were rescued by a friendly man of war. A man of war is just a very, very large naval vessel. It's the equivalent of one of our heavy cruisers or destroyers in the U.S. Navy today. It had all the cannons on the side. It was primarily a warship. If you've played Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, you're very familiar with this type of sea vessel. It was one of the big ones that you had to take down on some of the boss fights or whatever. But if you've never played Assassin's Creed 4, there you go. There's some ships. All right. So let's move on down here. Here is a picture of the North Star. It is the abolitionist newspaper that Frederick Douglass published. Now, if we're going back to what we had learned previously, abolitionists abolish. If you're looking right here, the root of that word, abolish, is to get rid of, and they were looking to get rid of slavery. So this newspaper was dedicated to the anti-slavery movement. And even as clever as the title is, the North Star, that is the star that slaves used on the Underground Railroad in order to find their way north. It was the main beacon of navigation that people used in order to get from one location to the other, that being the South to the North and to the Free States. The North Star, abolitionist newspaper. So here we go. So this is the North Star first edition, December 3rd, 1847. All right. So he's publishing a newspaper for the anti-slavery movement 2 years after writing his autobiography. I think that's important to remember. All right. And our last two items here, we have, I believe the last two. Yeah. Item G, the defense of slavery. That song would be good. Quotes from The Universal Law of Slavery by George Fitzhugh from Africans in America. He, the Negro, is but a grown-up child and must be governed as a child, Not as a lunatic or criminal. The master occupies toward him the place of a parent or guardian. The Negro race is inferior to the white race, and living in their midst, they would be far outstripped or outwitted in the chaos of free competition. Our Negroes are not only better off as to physical comfort than free laborers, but their moral condition is better. Sorry, I would have done a more racist Southern accent, but I wasn't really planning on that. Maybe next time. All right. That's from George Fitzhugh, The Universal Law of Slavery, 1857. So a decade after the North Star starts being published. All right, this debate's still going on about the inferiority of someone based on the color of their skin. And then here's a picture of an American Anti-Slavery Convention in 1840, 5 years prior to Frederick Douglass writing his autobiography. All right. So it looks like the abolition of the slave trade. All right, so it looks like these gentlemen are talking about getting rid of the slave trade. And I don't necessarily recognize any of the faces in there, but you can see there is one man orating. He's talking to this crowd of people, presumably the majority of them white, because that was the majority of the abolitionists in the North was white people. And that's it. All right. So, guys, there is the gallery walk. Feel free to go back to the video to relook over those things, to pause and fill out your sheet accordingly for each item about the connection to the central text, what you found interesting, and then any questions that you may have had in those. I'd be more than happy to answer them. Make sure you post those in your Flipgrid. All right. You're going to be answering the questions in relation to what you saw here and your response to them. So I look forward to hearing what you have to say. I will be sharing mine shortly with you. So with that said, any questions that you may have, use my office hours, send me those emails. Just really excited to be able to interact with you guys in some capacity. So again, just get a hold of me in any way that you can. I will be more than happy to help. Stay safe out there. Wash your hands. Don't touch your face.